All right. Well, I am so excited for another episode of Leaving a Rich Legacy. As most of you know, this is like a love letter to my younger self where I talk about different topics that I felt like I just did not get a chance to talk about as a young girl, as a teenager, in my 20s, and even my early 30s. So I'm super excited to have this conversation today. So right now, I'm in a series where I'm talking about IVF and fertility, specifically in honor of my 1 year anniversary of freezing my eggs, which was last month. And I am going to be just meeting with some women and having conversations about their journeys and really educating women in the Black and Brown community because we do not talk about fertility, infertility. And I think it's so important, especially for women who, desire to have children and don't think about asking these questions. So I am so excited to have my good friend Monica here today to share her journey with us. We have been friends for over 10 years now. So I'm so honored that you are here today. And I'll just open it up and tell us a little about Monica. Who is Monica?
Well, hello, everyone. Jessica, thank you for having me. Monica, who is Monica? Monica is a young woman from Vicksburg, Mississippi, so small town, USA. It's definitely where I'm from. Raised by a single mother or divorcee. And I am married. I have two little boys. I'll just call them Phineas and Ferb on today because that's their latest nickname. And I have a sister and an older brother. Career-wise, I am a leader in corporate America. I've been leading in corporate America for the last, I guess maybe 10 or 11 years at this point. I've been with that company for almost 16 years. So it's in the insurance industry. It's how I met Jessica, just by chance and luck. Our paths crossed. And then on the side, I love cooking, shopping, reading, and spending time with my family and friends. I love a good brunch and a good bottle of wine.
We all love the wine.
Yes.
Now, I have to say this just to put it out there, but Monica is an excellent cook. And Monica is going to open a restaurant in DFW that is just going to set the bar so high. I love food. I'm a foodie. And anybody who has ever had her food will tell you that Monica can throw down. So yes, you are an excellent cook. You know that I love your food. So talented with that. And, you are a leader and a great mom and wife and so many things. So I'm so excited for you just to be here to share. Because as a friend, there's different things that we go through with our friends and their journeys. And this was important for me to share. So tell us a little about your story of a couple years ago. Wow, I don't know if it was a couple years ago. That might have been almost 5 or 6 years ago, several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell us about the first experience that you went through your journey.
Sure. So my story is a little different from most women because, as I stated, I have two boys, Phineas and Ferb, and they were conceived naturally with no assistance for any fertility reasons. All things was good. Life was good. I had my last live birth in 2015, and about I guess it was about 2 years, 2.5 years later, my husband and I, we found out we were pregnant again. So of course, at the time, again, corporate America, working, I would say a non-traditional job or role at that particular time in my life. I was a proximity manager. So, I'm out climbing roofs with my folks, going to fire scenes, digging through rubble, trying to figure out what contents are and everything, you know, trying to work out, get my life together health-wise. And, you know, I found out I'm pregnant. So, you know, immediately you always just go and you schedule that initial appointment. You always have that bit of anxiety, I feel, prior to that appointment. The anticipation and waiting game that you kind of go through, because a lot of times it's not a quick appointment. You know, especially where I was with health demographics there in the state of Mississippi. I was back in Mississippi at that particular time when the first situation occurred. Was one of the things for me with even trying to get the initial appointment was that the doctor that had delivered my youngest son, he had actually passed away after shortly, maybe a year after I had Ferb. So at that particular point, you know, calling that practice to see if somebody can work me in, because, you know, you kind of have your woman's intuition that really stands up sometimes. So it's like, I know the test says I'm pregnant, but some things, you know, they were feeling off at the time. I just didn't know what it was. So I was really anxious at this particular point. So I was able to call a doctor in a couple of towns over, and they were able to see me for a same day appointment when I made that actual phone call, which was awesome. You know, you go in for the initial ultrasound to look at the images, you know, lab work and all that good stuff. And you're hoping for nothing but the best. Like, I'm ready to plan out the surprise. How am I going to tell everybody? And since I have Phineas and Ferb, which are two boys, you know, everybody's hoping like, oh, this is that girl at that particular point. And when the tech was actually doing the ultrasound, she didn't say anything, but, you know, she took pictures. I'm like, lady, are you done yet? Like, let's get this over with. And after that, you know, the doctor came into the room to have a discussion with me because at that particular point, you know, just based on timing and all that kind of stuff of my last cycle, my levels were there. But the thing is the imaging, the location of where the baby should be, it wasn't there. So basically what was occurring, and she had to educate me on this particular condition because I'd never heard of it before. I was having what's called an ectopic pregnancy. So I'm going to be honest with you. I had to Google it because I'm like, she's telling me, but I need to see this for myself. You know, sometimes you just have to see it and read it for yourself to really understand it at that particular point. And I'll tell you, she was a woman of color, but she didn't give me that feeling of the warmness that you would hope that if it was something going on. It was more like I felt like I was going through an interrogation with all of the questions that she was asking me. And I'm like, what is going on? So, you know, I had to go back and do some research because I wanted to know, especially when she left me in the room for a little while. I'm like, why is she asking me all these questions? Like, let me figure out what's going on. I'm like, am I dying and I don't know or something? Like, what is this? So, of course, I educated myself. And for those that don't know what an ectopic pregnancy is, it's basically when an embryo fertilizes itself outside of the uterus. So when the images were done, she couldn't find anything with that particular ultrasound inside of my uterus. Even though I was reading all blood work and everything showed that based on my levels, I was pregnant for sure. They just couldn't find it. It's basically what it boils down to. So with that particular process, I pretty much went to the doctor for a couple of days, back to back to back. And I'll never forget it because unfortunately during this particular time, my oldest was graduating from kindergarten. And you know, you have all those end of the year awards programs and ceremonies. So, you know, you have to put this face on, you know, you've been told that, hey, this is a ectopic pregnancy. And I think the biggest thing for me was they told me about it, but at the same time, they were giving me a little sense of hope. And, when I look back on it now, it could have possibly been more so false hope than anything, especially when I tell you about the next occurrence and how that went completely different. This doctor had me coming in each day to do additional lab work to see if my levels were going to change. Because based on your HGC level within your blood, it could have been that it was so early on that the embryo wouldn't be detected by the ultrasound. So maybe I needed some more time for the levels to go up. It could have been a very early pregnancy alert. So they were, having me come in every day. I was driving an hour every day to go get blood tests done to see if my levels were going up. After the levels went up so far, I think I would say the third or fourth day, they sent me to a different imaging location where they had a specialized ultrasound that they could do, where they would actually be able to see the entire female reproductive system. And I went over to that particular location, and that was the day that I found out it was an ectopic pregnancy, because at that point they'd already told me, so I didn't need anybody to confirm once the images started. But it was also the day that I heard the heartbeat, and that was the last day I ever heard the heartbeat. And I don't think I've ever shared that with anybody, that was one of the things that they were trying to determine was, okay, if it is an ectopic pregnancy, there's different ways that you can treat it. And if there's a heartbeat, there's certain things they can't do because of laws of states, especially when they're putting stipulations on the female reproductive system and the choices that we should be able to make with our bodies. So at that particular time, I heard the heartbeat, and I can remember tears going down my face. The tech, she was great. She handed me tissue. She touched my shoulder, and she just gave me a moment to compose myself. And she's like, I'm going to have to send you back over across the street to the doctor's office. And, I ask that you definitely go back. And the reason why she was saying that is because what people oftentimes don't realize, of course, childbirth is one of the most deadly things for women. It's definitely a precious opportunity that we all should be grateful for, whether we're doing it for ourselves, we're doing it with assistance, we're doing it with someone else's help, because it's very life-threatening. And so with the ectopic pregnancy, it's a life-threatening condition that can cause uncontrollable bleeding. And you can basically bleed out. And that's how, if it's not caught in a reasonable amount of time, some people will faint, pass out, it'll rupture. And if they don't get to the hospital in time, you will bleed out from it. Wow. So of course, most people will tell you, one thing about me is that I try to gather myself, even if I'm emotional or I have these complex things going on in my life. I try to collect myself and still remain professional at the same time. And I'll tell you, it is not always easy, but I try, but I really do try. So I went back across the street. They had already notified the doctor. The first doctor, she works in a practice with two other doctors, and she was actually going out of town. So I knew that I wouldn't possibly see her again. I ended up meeting with another doctor. It was like night and day. And I was kind of disappointed because she didn't look like me. She was an Asian American, and she was great. She came in the room. She actually touched me. She broke it to me gently. And she said, I really need you to go check into the hospital. I want you to go straight here to the hospital. And from there, I'll have you ready for surgery first thing in the morning. You'll be my first person. And Jessica knows this about me. I have to organize things for my kids because I feel like nobody can organize it without my involvement. And I was like, negotiation time. I was like, Ma'am, no, I can't. I promise you, I will show up in the morning, but I need to get my kids situated. At that time, again, like I told you, I had a kindergartner, and I think my baby would have been maybe almost 2 or a little bit younger than 2, give or take. And I was like, I need to get them organized. I need to make arrangements because one child needs to go to one relative, another one needs to go to another one. Like, I just need to plan. But I said, I promise, I'll be back. And so, of course, I called my family. I called my husband to let him know what was going on. And I told him what I was going to need from him at that particular point. I called my mother and my aunt to tell them what support I was going to need at that particular time, because I would be down for even once for my particular situation. I'm sorry for jumping around, but for my particular situation, since there was a heartbeat, I would not be able to simply take a medicine injection to dissolve or end the pregnancy. I would actually have to have surgery in order to do that. And what that surgery would entail would be completely removing that particular tube that the baby was in. So that made the situation a little different because, you can't lift a certain amount and all this kind of stuff, all the directions that they give you after you have surgeries. So I had to make arrangements. It's basically that. So.
And can you clarify tube just for anybody who can't connect the dots on that?
Sure. So, and I'm sorry, you'll have to elaborate a little bit more on what you want me to clarify.
The tube. So when you say the tube, what tube?
Oh, okay. Tube. Sorry. So yes. So my particular ectopic pregnancy was located in my fallopian tubes. So, of course, human anatomy, but you have a left and a right. And on that particular situation, this was my right tube, my right fallopian tube. Yeah.
All right. So you go, all right, so now you got to have surgery. You get your kiddos planned for and taken care of. And so you have to have surgery and they remove the right tube.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how long was the recovery for that or time that you were down?
I think I was down about 3 weeks. Part of the time was really just giving my hormones a chance to readjust. Because like I said, I had a very physical job at times. And a lot of the things that are required of me, I really couldn't completely do. And I didn't want everybody to have their eyes on me or constantly ask me at that particular point, are you okay? And checking in with me. So I just took the time that I needed in order to give myself a chance to heal and recover and get my strength back at that particular point. I would say during that particular time, it wasn't a big mental impact to me because I was hopeful. I'm like, when I talked to the doctor, I was like, I have another tube, right? So we're still good. Okay, we're cooking with grease then. So, I was optimistic at that particular point, and I wasn't as concerned on the future at that particular time.
All right. So I have one question and then I have 2 questions. Okay. So when you found out and you shared it with your family, had anyone else in your family or your support system ever gone through this experience?
Not that I'm aware of. And I would say one reason why is that things like this aren't talked about in my family, or it's not talked about until later down the line. We may not talk about it for 3 to 5 years at that particular point. So I wasn't aware. No one had ever actually told me that. I would say that based off of my experience, one of my cousins actually ended up experiencing it after I did. And I was able to talk her through my steps, my questions, my experience, because I didn't want her to have any of that feeling of that you did something wrong at that time. And I think it's important to provide that reassurance and support in that way as well. And then I also had a good friend and sorority sister. She went through it later on down the line. So, you know, I would share my stories if someone shared with me that they were going through that, but I wasn't necessarily open with everybody sharing, and my family wasn't open in the sense of, especially my older female relatives, with sharing of if anybody in the past had had that issue before.
Okay. So you have the surgery and you are still hopeful. As you said, like at that point, you're like, all right, we still got one left. So what happened next? Like, let's talk about the future. And with that one tube, you got one tube and that's your hope. Your
Right.
hope.
Right. So one funny thing is none of my kids were ever planned. It was kind of like, hey, it just happens. And so, you know, never thought about anything. So I'll never forget the timing of the second time it happened to me. It happened again with my only tube that I had left. I found out in November of 2019 that we were pregnant. It was right before our 6-year wedding anniversary. So it was really exciting at the time because we were going to be celebrating and having this experience. My husband, Jessica, as well, she was going to be tagging along, and you know, she tricked me some, y'all too, just let y'all know. But I found out right before we went home to Mississippi for Thanksgiving at that particular time. So of course I was taking it easy, hoping for the best at that particular time. However, I'll never forget, it was Thanksgiving night. I had gone to my mom's side of the family and had dinner and everything. And at this point, I left to go see my dad's side of the family. And I go to use the restroom. And when I go to use the restroom, my heart just sinks. And at this particular time, I've told no one but my husband that we're pregnant, and he wasn't there. He was gone to visit his family that lives in the same town. So I'm like freaking out, and I feel like I need to tell somebody just in case I passed out on the floor. They'll have an idea maybe, of what's going on. And so I pulled my my stepmom aside, and I told her that, hey, I'm pregnant, but at this point, I'm spotting, I'm bleeding. It wasn't heavy, that it was super alarming, but it was just the thought of the prior experience and seeing that I'm like, no, not again. So I call my husband. We go to the local emergency room. And of course, they assess me and all that good stuff. And they basically tell me, hey, put your feet up. It's still very, very early. Wait and see. It's very common in pregnancies, especially early pregnancies, to have the spotting bleeding. So let's just give it a chance. He said, if you have a doctor that you can go see where they can do, some additional scans and testing, definitely by all means, give it a go. And so the next day, that same doctor I'm visiting, remember, the same doctor that had performed my surgery the first time, she was actually able to get me in her office, which I was thrilled about at that particular point. And that's why I said there was a difference in how she treated me. She was able to get me in her office. Of course, I explained the situation. I'm like, I feel like it's happening again. I'm like, this can't be happening again to me at this point, because, my hope was that one tube. So of course she did her normal testing, lab work and everything. She had some concerns, but she told me, what I'm going to do is because I was going to be leaving in a couple of days anyway. She said, once you find a doctor in Dallas, because at that point I didn't have a doctor. Once you find a doctor in Dallas, I'll send over my lab results. And then I will also go ahead and try to recommend for them to just, even if they can't get you in to be seen, to have this lab work done. And I will find somewhere where you can go. She was actually going to set it up for me in Texas, which was great because she actually had a friend from medical school that she was trying to see if she was close enough, because she was willing to make that call to handle those logistics that I needed at that particular time, because she already knew I was a little bit fragile during that particular process. She wasn't able to coordinate with that particular doctor, but she did coordinate the lab work so that once I got back to Texas a few days later, the levels can be checked. And then that way, whoever the new doctor would be would have an opportunity to compare notes. One thing about Dallas for sure, it is definitely hard to get into a doctor's office. So I basically sent out a message to my friends here, just trying to see, did anybody have a doctor that would be willing to get me in just for an emergency. I never told them what was going on in particular at that point, but I put out the call and they answered, and I was able to find a doctor. When I called that particular practice, very large practice, but I said, I'm at this point, I'm at y'all's mercy. Anybody that you can get me with, I would greatly appreciate it, because this is my situation. However, that took, from Thanksgiving until that appointment, it took almost 15 days. So those 15 days, that's me with anxiety, trying to, at the same time, still trying to work, raise kids. At the time, my husband was traveling over the road. So it was me doing everything. There weren't many breaks in between that time. So there wasn't a point where I could truly break down and be emotional. I had to hope for the best, pray for the best, and continue my day-to-day activities at that particular point. From there, December 11th was the appointment. I went in for the appointment, and I would say the staff was great. And I would tell you the only bad part for me was that the tech that handled the ultrasound for that particular visit, she completed her exam like she was supposed to, but most of the time you don't think the tech is going to tell you the results of the ultrasound. You would think that, that's going to come from the doctor. Like I told you, in the previous situation, that tech, she took tons of pictures, but she never alarmed me that anything was going on. However, it was a different situation at this particular time in life. And she told me, she was like, oh, you're having an ectopic pregnancy. And my heart just stopped. She didn't know my story, but I just thought it should have been handled differently. I felt that way. And the other part was, once she told me, I had to go back and sit in the waiting room with a waiting room full of pregnant women at different stages of their pregnancies, with their spouses or partners. And I was there by myself when this information was shared with me. So again, like I told you, I am a woman that tries, to hold things together. I'm definitely emotional, but in certain situations, I try to remain calm and not show the emotions at that time. And as the nurses are coming to get patients, and the waiting room is getting a little bit quieter, I pick up the phone and I call my husband. And I can't remember where he was at the time, but I believe it was like, I'm going to say in the Chicago area or somewhere. So he's far away from me at this particular point. And I think I could barely get the words out completely, but I finally told him, full on tears. And I'm like, it's happening again. And he's like, what's happening again? And I'm like, because of course, y'all know men don't remember appointments. And I'm like, I'm at the doctor's office and the ultrasound tech just told me that I'm having another ectopic pregnancy. And I was like, this can't happen again. Because at that point, it was starting to set in for me that my chances of having a natural birth with normal reproductive organs is over. That's it. If there's no tubes, there's no way for the eggs to get where they need to go to do all the things that our bodies do. And I knew that was it for me. And I cried. I cried. And then on top of that, I'm meeting a new doctor, at the same time. And the doctor, small world, she had my same name. So I was like, oh, okay, so this works. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a sign. And she was very, very, very professional, but she was ready to move very rapidly. And I could understand her concern because, like I told you before, it's a life-threatening condition. Doctors' offices and hospitals, they're not close together necessarily to residential areas in Dallas. So there's always a distance and a drive. So I feel like the thought for her would be, sending me home to do anything may chance it for the ectopic pregnancy to rupture, and I may not get to a hospital quick enough. So we're sitting down talking, and again, I'm like, look, press pause. Because I need some organization and some order. I got 2 kids at home, a husband across the world. Just give me a moment. Like, pump the brakes. Are you sure about this? Like, let's make sure. Let's do some more imaging, some more lab work. I'm in, again, full negotiation mode. And I can actually smile a little bit now because we have a great relationship. I'm still with the same doctor now. And she's like, I understand. I'm going to give you a minute so that you can, talk to your husband again to explain what we're going to need to do. So what was different about this particular ectopic pregnancy in comparison to the first one was that the fetus or baby, whatever you want to call, the child was, there was no heartbeat. So at that particular point, it wasn't a pregnancy that would have been able to continue anyway. If it would have gone to the right location. At some point, the development didn't continue. So what was different at this particular time is that I wouldn't have to have surgery. So I was excited about that. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't have to have surgery. And what the other form of treatment is, it's an injection that they give you. The injection is based, again, on the HGC in your blood levels, determines how much of the medicine that you need to help dissolve, is the word that she utilized, dissolve the pregnancy, will be based off of that. And so, again, there goes the lab work and all that kind of stuff that needs to continue. So I asked her, my husband spoke to her over the phone, and we asked that, hey, can we just wait till somebody can be there with me? And so at the time, like I told you, my husband was across the country somewhere. He notified his dispatcher of what was going on, and thankfully, they sent him home. They rented him a car. Just told him to leave the truck wherever it was. They rented him a car, and he drove all night to get home so that he could be there with me the next day. That was the support I needed at that particular point because I really was falling apart. The person that's usually able to contain her emotions, she was no longer there at that point. That is when the mental turmoil started for me at that particular point. When I heard the text say that, I would tell anybody, I slowly started to check out. And when I say check out, I mean check out. Because like I said, it was December the 11th. Days before, being hopeful and optimistic, I found this cute little Christmas ornament. And it's specifically for an ultrasound picture. So I made that purchase days before this appointment, ready to put it on the Christmas tree so I could surprise my kids, my family, because my mom and my sister was coming into town. My dad is already here, and my stepmom, but we're going to have Christmas all together. And that was going to be the way that we announced that, you know, we were pregnant. So like all of this is going through my head because I'm like, okay, I'm a week away from most of my family, my important family coming, and this is happening. I'm working. It's a very crucial time at work, especially end of the year for us. So my mind is just going. And at the same time, I could hear myself screaming, even though it wasn't coming out of my mouth. And of course, you know, I called or I texted my friends to let them know what was going on at that particular point. And I prepared for the next day for the injection. I had to go in first to get the labs done. The medicine, I would tell you the way that they describe it is it's similar to chemo, is what they're utilizing for this particular process. And it does not feel good at all. She has to do, like, you have to actually, the way it worked is that you have your labs done, you go up and meet with the doctor. She actually calls in the prescription to the hospital pharmacy, and then you have to wait for the prescription to be prepared. And then you go back with this prescription that you know is about to, you know, end all at this particular point. And you're going to get this injection. And this injection is going to make you sick. It is going to make you tired. And you're going to experience cramping, almost in a sense, contractions, the way they feel. Like your body's going to go through that entire process. So I went again, cried again, because I think I had to wait a couple of hours before she could give me the injection. Because of course she's seeing patients, she's delivering babies and all that good stuff. So it was always this wait, this very nerve-wracking wait. And, you know, finally I went back for the injection. I'd already called my boss as well the day prior when I found out, you know, basically he was great. Ed, he was great. I called and I think I may have burst out crying, and that's when he really knew something was wrong. Ed and I are very similar in personalities. We don't smile all the time. We're fun people to be around, but you know, you may not approach us. We don't have that approachable face. And I started crying. I told him what happened, and he just kept saying, "Monica, I'm so sorry. It's okay." You know, he was trying at that particular point to provide comfort as well. So during the injection process, I already told him, I was like, "Hey, you know, I'm going to be out." So, you know, it was very important for me to always let people know that, you know, not everything that was going on, but I wanted you to know enough so you wouldn't push me too much, and you would understand why I'm not there, whether it's physically or mentally, if I've checked out. So after the injection, I took a week off to go through this process, and the process each day was different. Some days I was good. Some days I wasn't. If I saw a baby, I cried. If I saw a pregnant lady, I cried. I think I just cried till I couldn't cry anymore. And mind you, during this particular time, the kids are getting ready to get out for the Christmas holiday or the winter holiday for the semester. And again, my oldest, Phineas, he had a Christmas program that he had been preparing for at school. And I knew that no matter what, I couldn't miss that program. Like, my kids know that I try my hardest to be there. It's not much going to stop me from being there. And my aunt and uncle had come to town for his program as well. So, it was a big to-do, his first program at this particular school. So we were trying to be their support. And I got up that morning, and I think this was like maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week, still going through this process, this body change, this mental anguish, because you're still I'm just trying not to break, because at this point, one thing I forgot to share is that with the injection form of dissolving the pregnancy, I should still have a good tube if everything goes well. So I still had that optimism, but I was still suffering, like, I'm just not going to do this anymore. So I do need to put that disclaimer out there. So I still had to get up and go. The day of his program, I started feeling really, really bad, really, really bad. And I was like, okay, Monica, you got to push through no matter what, just keep trying. Made it through the program, snapped up the pictures with the fake smile and everything on it. And from there, the next day, my husband, he gets up and takes the kids to school. And I've been laying around on the couch at this point pretty much all morning. And I told him, I was like, I'm going to try to take a hot shower. I'll tell y'all, I'm the person, how ginger ale solves all of our problems. The next thing is a hot bath or a hot shower for me. So at this particular point, I couldn't take baths, but I could take a hot shower. So I got up, I made it to the bathroom, and I just felt the sharpest, excruciating pain, and I felt a gush. And I was like, what in the heck just happened? And, I made it to the toilet so I could try to assess, like, what the heck is going on? My whole inside's falling out, or, that's what I'm thinking at that particular point. And the pain just gets worse and worse and worse. And of course, after any procedure or anything that's done, the doctors, will ask you to call their emergency number based off of these criteria. This is one of those criteria at that particular point. My husband calls, and she's like, you need to get to the emergency room right now. I lived 45 minutes almost away from that emergency room, and that was the longest ride of my life. We made it to the emergency room. She'd already called down there, so they would be prepared and ready to go at that particular point. And, I was given pain meds, morphine, and, all the good stuff. And I had to go through grueling ultrasounds because they needed to see what was going on inside of me. And of course, blood work and everything. By the time they had done all of that, had gotten my pain under control, she came down to review the images, and that's when she confirmed that the injection hadn't worked, and that the ectopic pregnancy was getting ready to rupture.
Oh.
And so at that particular point, I think it wasn't even a cry. I think I just wept in that emergency room at that particular point. And there was nothing, anyone could do or say at that moment. And again, she slowed down, because at that point she's learned how I need to have a moment before we start talking about next steps. How are we going to move forward? And she gave me and my husband some time so that we can talk. And because her hope was to remove the pregnancy in some kind of way, save the tube, so that I would still have an opportunity at some point to hopefully have a natural pregnancy again. So, you know, it was a conversation. I had to be, at that point, you know, I had to dry those tears, because at this point I need to be realistic as well with the life that I have now. And I can remember, you know, telling my husband that, you know, if anything happened to me, to make sure our boys stay together and to do his darndest to ensure they finish school, they have a successful life. And then for him also, like, you do what you need to do for, you know, yourself. Don't mourn me forever if something happens. Because with the amount of pain that I was in, and morphine wasn't something I had had before, like, I had a lot of medicine in me at that point to control that particular amount of pain. And I knew with the surgery that she was doing, anything could happen, you know, when she went in. And the other thing is that we prayed. I always tell people we're definitely believers. Was I angry, even though I, you know, wanted to pray at that moment? I was praying more so for my kids, that no matter what happened, they will be at peace. They could be happy. They could live their life. I think at that point, for myself, I was a little bit angry. I would admit that I was angry. So I didn't want to talk to God personally about me, because I'm like, we don't have to have a conversation. It wasn't supposed to happen again. But I wanted to make sure that they were okay. My family, my mom, I'm the baby of the family. My dad, you know, this was a tough one, because I had to make those phone calls as well, because only thing about my negotiations this time was, I wasn't leaving the hospital to do anything. They were taking me into surgery that day. As soon as they could get an operating room together for me, I wasn't allowed to walk by myself, use the restroom by myself. Like, they had somebody watching me at all times, just in case something went wrong and they needed to act immediately. I think the earliest I could have surgery was like 7 or 8, maybe a little earlier that night. So I had to make those phone calls to my parents, who didn't even know I was pregnant, because at the same time, I still hadn't shared any of that information, because I'm like, if I can deal with it, and if it's okay, and it could be a surprise, that type of thing. So I had to make those particular phone calls. And at the time, my dad had just had knee replacement surgery. So he wasn't able to get to me, which for him, he's a big guy, but he's just a teddy bear. That didn't sit well with him, because he was the closest parent I had there. I told my mom, and she's like, you know, you make sure Nashawn calls me as soon as you go to surgery, you get out of surgery. Like, she gave her instructions. I'm like, we got it. Yeah. They are who they are.
Moms, ain't it? The moms. Let me talk to that doctor.
Yes. And so the doctor came back in, and to my surprise, she actually had some comforting, kind words to say as well. And then I was just straightforward with her from there. I was like, if you can save my tooth, save it. But only save it if it doesn't cost me my life. Because I had to realize, and this was nobody but God, I'm sorry, that's who I believe in. It was nobody but him, that even though I was mad, the sense and the comfort came over me that I needed to live for the kids that I had here breathing, seeing them grow up and participate in activities, have their own kids, you know, all that good stuff. And I told her that, and we sat there, had our moment of silence together, and she said, I understand. And I told her, I said, dear, I will not be mad at you. I will have no ill will towards you. If you can save it without taking my life, awesome. You're the greatest. But if you really need to take it, because I do want to have a chance to see my kids grow up. And at that particular point, she didn't elaborate on anything, but she did tell me at that particular point in time that there were options. She was just like, there's other options out there and we can discuss it later, but let me take care of this for you and I'm going to do my best. At the time, again, it was Christmas holiday. And at this particular point, I think I am like five or 6 days before Christmas, we're talking about having this emergency surgery that's going to require overnight hospital stay and everything. And, you know, she let me know ahead of time that, hey, my partner will check on you in the morning. I'm going to check on you tonight before I leave, but she was going out of town. It's basically what she was preparing me for, so that I wouldn't feel disconnected or that she'd abandoned me. She was making sure that I was secure in what the plan was for the surgery and what's going to take place afterwards. Go through surgery, come out of surgery, fine. One of the funniest things is during that particular time after surgery, you know, and after this experience, you go back and you think about things. And I'll be honest, at times I thought maybe I was losing it a little bit. But at some point, I can remember parts of the surgery. And I didn't find out until I think maybe my 6-week or 4-week follow-up. I finally had the courage to ask her. I said, I want to ask you something, because at this point I'm thinking I'm having a crisis and maybe I should be committed or something, because I was really going through it. I asked her, I said, during the surgery, did you say something about a hernia? And she kind of looked, and I was like, okay, yeah, I really have lost it. And she was like, yeah, I did, but you were asleep, you were medicated. And I chuckled, because at that particular point, I was like, okay, so God was in the room. He woke me up for a brief moment to let me know, hey, girl, you fine. You're going to be just fine. And it's going to be okay. I would tell you the first 3 or 4 weeks, it was very, very painful. Just the recovery process, because again, like I stated before, in some situations, I was having contractions. And for me at that particular point, I didn't know this, but you can have contractions in more than one area. So I was feeling it in my thighs. I would have this excruciating pain and a contraction, just say our normal cramps times 15, 20, maybe 50. So it's literally you are walking and you're having to stop to wait for it to pass. And I was having to stop to wait for it to pass through my lower extremities so that I could just function on a daily basis. And I would say I made it through Christmas with my family. And after that, I would say I really, really went through a tough time mentally and emotionally at that particular point. Most days I stayed in the bed. My husband stayed off as long as he could with me. I think he probably stayed off every bit of 4 to 5 weeks with me, just to kind of help me function, like to make sure I was eating, that I would get up and take a bath. I went into full postpartum depression mode funk where I just basically was going through the motions. If I had to take them to school, especially like once he went back to work, it was literally, I was a zombie. I was just moving, not really living, not really talking. I was reserved. And that's the way I functioned during that particular time. I would say that my doctor, she was very supportive. Because when I did go back for one of the follow-ups, she asked me, she's like, how are you doing mentally and everything? And, again, I'm that person, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I never realized that my husband was in the background shaking his head saying no. And so at that particular point, she said, hey, I'm going to give you a little bit more time off of work. But during this time, I want you to find a therapist. And I want to see if I can get you in with, I always confuse the name of the doctor. I think it's a psychiatrist that handles the medication for anxiety, depression, those types of emotional behavior deficiencies or conditions, condition. So she referred me to someone so that she could make sure that the medicine was managed accordingly based off of my needs as well. But it was a resource, at that particular point. That's when she talked about the options that I had and the option that she shared about previously, which was IVF. And that was basically my journey within a 2-year time period of 2 ectopic pregnancies and, losing my ability to naturally have children.
As your friend, we have never sat and really talked about all of this. So it's so interesting to hear all of the details. When they say you got to check on your strong friends, that would be true. And that's a lot, that's a lot. But for you to even say, for you to get to a place where you tell your husband, like, hey, this is what I need to make sure you take. Still planning. Something happened. I need to make sure you know what I'm expecting of you. That speaks volumes. But then even, that moment with the doctor, that was powerful. Like if you're like, I gotta live for the kids that are here.
Correct.
And that had to have been tough in that moment, but still, like you said, you got to be there for your kids that are here.
Right. I mean, because, at that particular situation, in that particular time, one of the other things I had to realize is that I was blessed to be able to do it twice with healthy full-term pregnancies. And there's some women out there that can't do it, at all. And I had to be realistic at that point of knowing that I needed to live for those kids that I have. Because I know any of those mothers would live for the children that they had as well. So it was important for me to make sure that I was realistic about the situation. Yeah.
So, over 2 years span, I remember celebrating that anniversary, and it was a big thing. All right, husband had a good surprise set up. But let's talk about healing through that. I love that your doctor was like, I love that your husband was an advocate for you when you could not be an advocate for yourself. So I think that's so important. But then also your doctor saying, hey, I think you need to see someone. How did you go to therapy, and how did that help you get through the healing process? And you may still very well be healing through this, right? Healing is a journey,
Correct.
So how did you go to therapy, and did it help?
Yes. So Anybody that knows me know that I can be really, really hard on my husband. I expect a lot at this point. And so it was great to know that he was my advocate at that particular moment, recognizing that if I probably would have gone back to work at that point, I probably wouldn't have my job today because I wasn't there. I did go ahead and make the call for the resources that she provided for me, which was the psychiatrist. And then one of the things that we're fortunate enough to have at my company is a company called LifeWorks that provides resources for us as well, with therapists and counselors and life coaches, you name it. If it's a situation, they can find you somebody. So at that particular point, I didn't start the therapy right away because, I'm a superwoman. I can just do it all. I didn't need that, but I did need a little medicine, level things out. I knew that. But when I finally realized that I did need to see someone, is actually when the pandemic started, because all of this was going on end of 2019, rolling into 2020. So, as we're sitting at home, I'm still trying to be boss at work and mom, wife. Once we came home, I started finding myself crumbling again. And I was like, you know what? I just need to talk to somebody. I don't want to pour all of my feelings out because I felt like it was too raw at that particular point. But I do need to talk to somebody just to glaze the surface at that point. So I did. I started to talk to a therapist during that particular time. It helped, but I would tell you the journey to even be able to get to this point to talk about it right now, it has been long. Because that one therapist, she couldn't do all the work. You also have to find that right person for you for that particular point in time in your life. Sometimes you'll find one therapist and they're great, but that wasn't what my journey was with finding a therapist. And I finally found someone during the pandemic that could handle virtual appointments, and we meshed well. And I kind of worked through those feelings that I was willing to share and those emotions I was willing to share at that time. I still talk to a therapist to this day, and we still, on occasions, I'll bring it up. I would say probably only just a few years ago, I've been completely comfortable with walking in the store and not necessarily staring at a baby or staring at a kid that would be the approximate age of my child. So it's definitely been a process of peeling back the onion, having my moments of emotions, then also trying to make sure at the same time I check in with my husband's emotions and feelings toward the situation, because he's still young. We're young, we're a young couple. We have 2 boys. He's always wanted a little girl. So, that's one of those things that I've always hung over my head as well, in conjunction with, the whole newfound, infertility issue that I suffer from. So having those conversations at points with him, and remembering to let him in, because I can be very closed off and not share my emotions, and remembering I need to, have that conversation to let him know, hey, I've been freaking out on you all week. This is why. This year for Christmas, this was a 3-year mark. And this was the first year for Christmas I really was completely engaged, full blown celebration mode, not really moping around the house. Like, I did none of that. And he even said, he's like, I'm so proud of you. He's like, I know this has been a long journey, but you did it. Like, I was in here wrapping gifts. Like, I hadn't wrapped gifts in years. After like 2019, I never wrapped another gift. You know, I knew I had the responsibility to buy gifts for people and, you know, my kids, but that was all I would do. I would do that and I would just stop. And it could be Christmas morning. I would be like, you gonna do it? Cause, you know, I'm not in the mood. I would just sit there, you know, again, fake smile for the camera's on. And that's kind of how I functioned around that time, the last few years. But this year, it was different. I was at peace. I recognize that no matter what, I'm still very blessed. I have beautiful godchildren. I have my best friend, one of my best friends that, you know, had her own fertility journey. She had her miracle baby this year. So I had her to buy for and all this good stuff. And I was finally, like I said, I was finally in a place where I could be comfortable. The burden wasn't on my shoulders. It wasn't in my heart. And I could be happy. Yeah.
That is so good. Good that you gave yourself the time, even though, right, we want to be superwoman, but you gave yourself the time to get through the place of you needing to be ready to wrap the gifts. And then also acknowledging your husband and his emotions, right? Because he had to be strong for you, but also recognizing that there's an impact on him as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Sometimes we forget about the men. So that's good that you mentioned that. Okay. So, wow. It's been a few years. You know, this is your first Christmas that you actually wrap gifts. So I'm assuming you just handed the presents. You just handed the Gucci belt. You handed the Gucci belt to the little man.
He would pick up my slack. Like he knew I would be, you know, wrong if I didn't, you know, say this and acknowledge it, but he would turn on his little Christmas music, you know, Silent Night by the Temptations that was his own. And he would get the tree decorated. Like I had decorated a tree. Like they did all of that. Him and the kids would decorate the trees, the outside of the house, and he would stay up and he would wrap those gifts. To make sure that they had the Christmas that he knew I desired for them, but I just wasn't capable at that point to do it. And I, you know, I thanked him for it. Like I had to share that appreciation for him for carrying that burden in a sense all those years, but he was really just supporting me and trying to ensure our kids had what they needed and what he knew was in my heart for them. I couldn't function. I wasn't ready yet. Yeah.
You know, it's going to be something that your kids may not look back on or remember, right? Because they're just tearing the gifts up. But, you know, as I think about my relationship with my parents, and I was just talking about this with someone yesterday, we have to be mindful of the capacity of what our parents had. You didn't have the capacity to show up at that time. Your husband was able to, you know, step in. But when we think about just even our parents and the expectations we have of them, it's a good reflection. Like, did they have the capacity at that moment to give us what we needed?
Right. I mean, that's completely true, because one of the things that I experienced through both of these ectopic pregnancies, I didn't have a lot of that connection with my mom at that time. And along my journey, I had to realize that maybe she didn't have the capacity to understand that it was still emotional for me, even though I did already have 2 kids. It was, you know, one of those things that was still very much important to me. And I needed that love and affection at that time that I really wasn't getting in that area as well from my mom. But I recognized that sometimes I was lashing out at her and I had never even really shared with her, like, you missed this opportunity to, you know, be with me. Let me lay my head on your lap again. all this stuff, that I had to really, reflect on that as well and learn to sit down and apologize and talk about situations. So it's definitely important for us to recognize that capacity that we can provide, and help one another when we see that they don't have that capacity.
Yeah. So you're mentally in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, do you desire at this point more children?
So I do.
Okay.
I do have a desire for more children. I have thought out the option that my doctor shared with me. I've actually met with fertility specialists,
Okay.
and I've done some of the initial work that needs to be done in order to see if it's even a possibility. So I know that my egg reserve is, just fine. I am able to, they're able to, have a clear path for this entire IVF process. However, a few during the pandemic or shortly after the pandemic, I was diagnosed with another condition. Doesn't affect any of my reproductive organs. It's actually my brain is a little different from everybody else's, I guess you can say. I have a condition called idiopathic intracranial hypertension. And the medicines that she used to treat that particular condition actually counteracts with the medicines utilized for the start of your IVF process. So my hope was to start IVF last June. However, we've had to postpone our journey at this particular point in time until I can get that particular condition under control where I'm not needing that medicine and I'm not, codependent on that medicine, so that I can have a healthy experience, because that medicine, especially once you get into the first trimester, it can result in, fertility loss again, or pregnancy loss, excuse me, again. So all doctors working together, like we were really, we were full speed ahead. I had started the process of taking a certain medicine. I don't even remember the name of it. Before you start the actual rounds of injection, I started that. And then it all came to a screeching halt when my neurologist shook hands with my fertility specialist, and they're like, let's pause. I know you're all in it, but we need to pause and get that taken care of so that you can have a successful pregnancy. So yeah, long answer to a short question, but yes, I'm still interested. I've checked into my possibilities and my options, and if in the future everything's okay, would love to do it. Hoping for that little girl, and going from there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love that your initial doctor, he gave you, shared the options, and then that both of your doctors work together, because sometimes there's just a disconnect, mm-hmm. right? And like you said, you want to make sure it's successful. And if right. if there's going to be, they're not going to mix, then I need you to let me know, because it's an expensive right. process.
Very.
But it says a lot about also the physician, because they should want the best results and to do everything possible, to help you be successful and get through the process. So that's good.
Yes,
that's good. Well, for any woman out there that is just feeling a little bit hopeless, do you have any advice for her? There's just so many different paths that they could, a woman can be on, thinking about infertility or trying mm-hmm. to go through IVF, whatever it is. Do you have any advice for someone who just might be like at the edge and, they're ready to break?
Yeah. I guess my biggest word of encouragement, or words of encouragement, is don't give up. If one doctor tells you something and you're not comfortable with it, You find the doctor that's going to be the advocate for you, that's going to be really truthful and transparent with your options. Join support groups that are groups from within the hospital, maybe other women that are, suffering from infertility or have suffered a loss. Find that support, because I think that is what helped me to be willing to continue my journey, and to look into my options. It's not like when I told my friends, I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about IVF. Nobody was like, girl, it's really expensive. Are you sure you got 2 kids? And this and that. Like, nobody did that. So that support system, if you can find it somewhere, it may not be your friends or your family. Mm-hmm. Find the support system that works for you. Have that hope. If you believe in a higher power, go to that power about your desires. Let them know what you speak out of your mouth is what will come to pass at the end of the day. So those are my words. And then also there's really some there's just great options and resources out there for you. So don't think about just the money of, and the experience. Really research those options, and even sometimes reach out to family members and friends. They may know someone that knows someone that can help you.
Yeah. So true. That is true. Well, Monica, thank you so much for just sharing your story and journey. I truly hope that it blesses someone else, no matter where they are in this process, because there is someone that is out there doing it alone and had to go through it alone. So I pray that it blesses someone else. And I truly appreciate you just being here and sharing and giving me hope. Like, I feel very inspired and hopeful just listening to how you are still smiling and, and laughing, and you still have so much life to give and still hoping of having a little girl. So I thank you so much, friend, and much appreciated.
Definitely. Can I end with one comment though before I go?
Sure can. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Like I shared before, this is the first time that I've really talked in depth about my journey over the last few years and what I've gone through, emotionally, physically, mentally, all the leaves at this particular point. But I really do thank you for the opportunity to share. And then for, ladies out there looking for resources, because IVF is really, really expensive. I do want to say that there are grants out there. There are finance companies that are out there where you will pay very, very low entrance on whatever your financial need is. And they have incredible payment rates and all that kind of stuff to help you through this journey. Don't feel like just because you get that breakdown of the IVF process that there are not resources out there to help you. My fertility specialist, he was great because his office shared some of those options as well. And then also going online, like I said, get into some of those different groups, you'll find out more about those different grants as well. So don't give up. If this is your desire, find a way. Find a way.
You have options. That's the most important piece. We have options. We have options. And if no one's talking about it, do your research, ask questions. And there's so many support groups out there, and they are so helpful. So don't be afraid to look into it. But great way to end this podcast episode. I appreciate you, friend. And you have a good evening.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.